Peace Barricade.
Hello and welcome on the Peace Barricade. This is a podcast devoted to advancing peace, and it is especially devoted to advancing peace in Eastern Europe. I am Maria Cernat, an academic based in Bucharest, and it is with great pleasure that I announce that today we have with us Scott Ritter. I think he needs no introduction. He's a media celebrity, apart from being a UN weapons inspector and having a very, very fruitful career in the military and then in the UN, and being the only voice that warned against the Iraq not having weapons of mass destruction. Oh, I'm so happy you're with us. Last time we spoke, you discussed war as a necessary evil, and yet tomorrow you have a big event advancing peace, promoting the idea that we have to do everything in our power to prevent a nuclear conflict. Did it evolve, or did I misread you initially when you said that war is a necessary evil?
Well, I'm sad to say that I still believe that war is a necessary evil. It's evil, and it should be avoided at all costs. But and I know some people don't like when I say this, but I refer to the classic American novel To Kill a Mockingbird. It was made into a movie starring Gregory Peck. And there's a scene in that movie where Gregory Peck is a lawyer, a man of law, a man of reason, um, who doesn't promote violence. He promotes reasoned, peaceful outcomes. But a rabid dog is loose in the town, and it is threatening the children of the town, threatening the safety of the town. And the sheriff comes up to him and hands him a rifle. And it's this man of peace, of reason, who takes the rifle and shoots the rabid dog. Um, and the daughter looks at her father and she says, why did they come to you? You're 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 a man who avoids violence. And the sheriff says that your father was the best marksman in our unit during World War One. He killed more Germans than anybody. Um, war is evil, and war should be avoided. But there are rabid dogs in this world that need to be shot, and
Oh,
when they're shot, they need to be shot by the men who know how to shoot. And I still believe this firmly. Um, Nuclear war, however, is something totally different. Nuclear war isn't a
but
rabid
how
dog.
come? But how,
Because
how is it different? Because now we see the Russians having a weapon that is so power, they brag about, or at least some military experts said, no, not the Russians, because it's not their style to brag, especially the officials. But there are military experts who say that the Oreshnik has the same uh, destructive power as a nuclear weapon, but it doesn't have the side effects. So doesn't this line between conventional war and nuclear war starts to blur?
no, no matter how many Oreshniks you use, the world will still exist. When you use nuclear weapons, the world ceases to exist.
Mhm.
But that's the difference between conventional war and nuclear war. Um, you're not shooting a rabid dog, you're destroying the planet. A nuclear war will destroy the planet, destroy everybody on the planet, especially nuclear war between the United States and Russia. It's a completely different category of conflict. Um, I and I think maybe you misperceive me. I'm not happy that there's rabid dogs. It doesn't make me happy that there are rabid dogs. I would prefer a world where we could vaccinate all animals to ensure that there are no rabies, that we wouldn't have to shoot rabid dogs. I would love a world where this didn't happen, but that's not the world we live in. And until we can get to that point, war is a necessary evil. There are head choppers in the Middle East, ISIS, Al Qaeda, that are on the offensive. They're going to take over towns and cities, and they're going to brutalize the population. They are rabid dogs, and we need people to shoot these rabid dogs. Otherwise, the entire society will collapse and be beheaded by these people. Um, that's where I stand. Would I prefer that we didn't have ISIS, Al Qaeda? Yes. I would love to live in a world where we didn't have rabid dogs, but they do exist. And as long as they exist, you're going to need people like me who know how to shoot and kill. Um, that's my reality. And I know that upsets people and people are unhappy with that. But the reality is, look at the world we live in. There's evil in the world today. And to confront evil, sometimes you need a necessary evil to defeat it. And that's what some war is. Nuclear war, however, is about the death of all life on the planet. And so I am doing my best to prevent a nuclear war from happening. Um,
Yes, tell us more about the event tomorrow because I
yeah.
think it's a very important event.
Well, it's tomorrow is just a day in a campaign that's trying to stop this. This effort, I mean, to be honest, I've been fighting against nuclear war my entire life, except when I was preparing to fight a nuclear war. I'm one of those guys that actually back in the day was involved in preparing to use nuclear weapons in combat. Um, and yet I was picked to go to the Soviet Union, to Russia, um, to implement a treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, in 1980. It was signed in 87. I started working in 1988. And for 2.5 years, I helped get rid of nuclear weapons, disarm the most destabilizing weapons imaginable, uh, intermediate range nuclear weapons. Um, and then I spent 7 years in Iraq getting rid of weapons of mass destruction, including Iraqi nuclear weapons. I've been an advocate for nuclear disarmament and for arms control in general since 1988, and it's defined my life. And I've spoken out about it. Recently, in the last couple of years, because of the deterioration of relations between the United States and Russia, it became apparent to me that there is a growing risk of nuclear confrontation between our two nations. Um, and I felt like in Romania, do you have the same fable we have, the boy who cried wolf, the little shepherd boy?
So in Romania, we have a situation now like you wouldn't imagine. I mean, we have all these intellectuals, academia, and they all screamed, oh, it's the Russians because a candidate came out of nowhere, Mr.
Nowhere. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And now we have such a crazy
Right.
situation
So,
in Romania that you wouldn't imagine.
no, I've been following that, but you cry wolf, 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 and then people come running out, and there's no wolf. It was a rabbit. The next night he comes out, wolf, wolf, and they come running out. It's not a wolf, it's a fox. And finally he comes out and goes, wolf, wolf. And the crowd says, you don't know what you're saying. And then the wolf comes out and eats the sheep. Um, that's how I feel about nuclear war. I've been crying wolf for a long time. I wrote a book, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, that was published in 2022. And I started saying that because the United States withdrew from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, Donald Trump did that in 2019.
Mhm.
These weapons are being thought of again, and we're returning to the dangerous situation of the 1980s. And so I started crying wolf, the danger of nuclear war. But then a nuclear war doesn't happen, and people say, it was just a rabbit. And then I'll come out and say, wolf, wolf, nuclear war, nuclear war. And they'll say, it was just a fox. Um, but today, I'm shouting nuclear war, nuclear war. And for the first time, people are saying, oh my God, there's a chance of a nuclear war. And it's a real chance. You talk about Oreshnik, and we spoke about that weapon, the Russian Oreshnik. It's an intermediate range missile. It's not supposed to exist. I got rid of those missiles. Myself and other inspectors spent 3 years destroying all of these missiles. They're not supposed to exist, and yet here it is because we forgot about arms control. We forgot about disarmament. We forgot about that important role that plays in preventing nuclear conflict. But it's more than that. When we look at what's going on between the United States and Russia and Ukraine, um, this conflict, and I don't want to bog people down because I know there's people who say the Russians should never have invaded Ukraine, and there's people that say Russia didn't invade Ukraine. It's a special military operation brought on by the expansion of NATO. NATO promised not one in eastward, and no, they didn't promise. We can get into all those debates. These are academic exercises that hopefully we can all live, and we can engage in these reappraisal of history. But the bottom line is today, the United States is at war with Russia. Legally, we are at war with Russia. We have taken a missile system, the ATACMS missile. We have given it to the Ukrainians, but they can't use it unless we enable them to use it. We pick a target, and then we take our intelligence and we turn that into digital data that is put into the missile so it can be fired against that target. We enable that missile to communicate to American satellites using encrypted communication signals that we control the encryption. This missile could not fire unless America made it fire. And so when it's fired against Russian soil, not contested Russian soil, ATACMS has been fired against Crimea, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Kherson, and there's no nuclear war. But when you fire it against Kursk in Belgorod, the Russians are saying you're attacking Mother Russia, the Russian homeland. Nobody will put up with this. And America is attacking Russia today. It is an act of war. No international lawyer can argue otherwise. It makes America an active participant to the conflict. And by deliberately doing this, this isn't an accident. This is a deliberate action by the United States to make this happen. That means that we have knowingly and wittingly committed an act of aggression against Russia. We are at war with Russia. I'll just say that one more time so your audience understands what I just said. America is at war with Russia. And the Russians recognize it as such and has said so. By attacking us, you have declared war against us. So now the question is, what does Russia do? This is a very dangerous situation we're in. Yes, the ATACMS missile by itself, I can't call it militarily insignificant, but it doesn't change the outcome on the battlefield. The Russians shoot down most of the missiles. The one that hit, they do damage. They have killed Russian soldiers, by the way. They have destroyed Russian equipment in Russia.
Yes.
It's not, but it doesn't change the fact that Russia is winning on the battlefield and Russia will continue to win. It doesn't change the political dynamic in Moscow. But what it does is it sets a precedent for the United States and NATO nations to attack Russia without any repercussion. And this creates an environment where Russia fears that these conventional weapons can be used to launch a preemptive attack against Russia that does have strategic value. And that preemptive conventional attack could be used to pave the way for a preemptive nuclear attack. Now, people will say, Scott, you're crying wolf. How do you get from using ATACMS to using nuclear weapons? Well, let me tell you how. A week and a half ago here in Washington, D.C., because I'm no longer in New York. I live in New York, but I'm down here for this conference tomorrow. A American military officer, Rear Admiral Thomas Buchanan, he is the director of plans. That means he writes the war plan for Strategic Command, our nuclear warfighting command, the guys who do the nuclear war. He makes the plans. He was briefing the think tank about things. He started off using the old mantra that I'm familiar with from Ronald Reagan and the INF Treaty and all this. Nuclear war cannot be won. Therefore, it should never be fought. Makes sense, right? Nuclear wars can't be won, so we should never fight them. That's why arms control was deemed valuable, because why have these weapons? If we ever use them, we all die. So why don't we figure out how to get rid of these weapons? And then they sent people like me, who I know you view as a warmonger, but I actually did go into the Soviet Union and get rid of the nuclear weapons that allowed you and the rest of Europe to live in peace for many decades. And we did that job, but now that treaty's gone, and here we are. Then he said something very amazing, and amazing not in a good way. He said that the Biden administration today is ready to fight a nuclear war with Russia and win it.
Wow.
So we start off with
But what
nuclear.
is wrong with these people? I mean, I understand that Joe Biden, he's of a certain age. He has some problems that were quite obvious lately. Now, I might understand why he does not realize the impact of what he's saying. But this guy that you're talking about, this is a well-informed person. Now, how can you win a nuclear war? Because the only way I see it is for some like 2,000 Americans surviving in a cave, or how do you win it?
Well, it gets even more dangerous than that because if it's 1,000 Americans in the cave, you don't win it. It's not going to be win. But so he starts off with that premise that the Biden administration is ready to have a nuclear war with Russia and win it. And a rational person is like you, who says, how can that be? You can't win a nuclear war. Now, he's the head of plans, so he's not supposed to give away the secrets, but he did. You
Oh,
see, he said that the United States, in winning this war, will retain sufficient nuclear weapons capability that after we defeat Russia, we will be able to deter China and the other nuclear powers with our surviving nuclear forces. All right, now you're going to sit there and go, okay, what does that mean? Well, the Russians know exactly what it means. You see, because the Russians have signed a treaty with the United States, the New START Treaty. It's the last remaining arms control treaty going back to the Cold War, and it creates nuclear parity, a balance. America has so many 1,550 nuclear delivery systems. Russia has the same number. It's parity. So how can you win a war if to take out the American systems, you have to use, or the Russian systems, you have to use all your systems? Because that means you have nothing left. How do you retain enough to deter China and everybody else? A nuclear surprise attack,
oh,
nuclear preemption. Now people say, but Scott, that's horrible. But America would never do that. In 2022, I'm sorry, Joe Biden published the Nuclear Posture Review. Nuclear preemption is one of the American strategies. Just this year, that Thomas Buchanan, that nuclear planner, he wrote a whole new nuclear war plan that is based upon the nuclear employment guidance of the president, which talks about nuclear preemptive attacks. The United States nuclear war plan for Russia is to launch a preemptive nuclear strike against Russia, hoping to take out the vast majority of the Russian weapons so that when
mm,
Russia hits us back, they only kill 6 American cities and kill 60 million American civilians. But see, we can win this war because we'll kill all of Russia.
wow.
But this is where we're at. So now the Russians are listening to this. This is where it even gets more scary. The Russians are listening to this, saying, these guys are serious. They're going to attack us preemptively with nuclear weapons. So, how can Russia survive? Because the Russians aren't suicidal. Yes, Vladimir Putin has said that if you hit us with nuclear weapons, we'll respond with nuclear weapons and we will all die, but we will go to heaven as martyrs. He has said that, sort of this fatalistic approach. But nobody wants to go to heaven as a martyr. Everybody wants to go to heaven as an old person who lived a long and fulfilling life, surrounded by family members who will mourn their passing, and you will be remembered in perpetuity by humanity. That's how we want to die. And the Russians are the same. They've worked too hard to build this country that they have, this revival, this Orthodox nation, things that they are proud of, just to throw it away because the United States has gone insane. So the Russians, how do you preempt preemption? By launching your own preemptive attack. So now the Russians say, okay, we have to be prepared. As soon as we think the Americans are getting ready to launch a
Mm.
preemptive attack, we have to prepare to launch our own preemptive strike in order to destroy their weapons before they destroy us. So now you have the Americans preparing to fight a war. They just admitted it. It's not speculation. People can't sit here and say Scott Ritter's just making stuff up. The director of plans of Strategic Command has admitted this is a plan that the Biden administration is ready to do right now. So what do the Russians do? They revise their nuclear doctrine, which they just did, which lowers the threshold of the release of nuclear weapons, which they have. And one of the things they've said is we will consider the use of conventional weapons by a non-nuclear power as an existential threat to us that can be used, can result in nuclear weapons if those weapons are provided by a nuclear adversary. The United States is a nuclear adversary that has just said we are prepared to fight a nuclear war with Russia and win, premised on the need for an American preemptive nuclear attack. We are now giving Ukraine ATACMS missiles that, when used, can be perceived by the Russians as the initiator of that very preemptive attack. So when Ukraine starts firing ATACMS missiles, that is the cue for Russia to launch their nuclear preemptive attack. That's the insanity that we live in today. And we are all going to die. That there is no recovering from this unless one thing happens. America stops allowing Ukraine to fire ATACMS missiles. Now, the Biden administration isn't going to do this. They've gone insane. They've gone off the rails.
But how come? Because they do realize that they risk their life, maybe, because what do they think, that they will be in the bunker, or what do they think? Maybe I live
No,
long enough, but what about the family? I mean, I don't really understand. I
think that
fail
Russia's
to see the
bluffing.
logic.
They think that Russia's bluffing. They don't believe Russia would do this. They think that Russia is bluffing. The CIA, remember, this is the same CIA, I just want people to understand, that told us that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. All right. It's the same CIA that said that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election, even though we now know he didn't. This CIA is now saying that they believe Russia is bluffing. They are wrong. Russia is not bluffing. That Russia is very serious about this. Why did Russia use the Oreshnik missile if they're bluffing? A strategic system of this capability has never been used before in combat, has never been used before in combat. Russia used it. That means that Russia's not bluffing. They are doing an escalation that leads us, if there's continued escalation, to nuclear war. So Russia's not bluffing. This is a very, very dangerous situation that we're in today. But fortunately, two things. One, America's not a dictatorship yet. We still have a democratic institutions, and one of those institutions is the Congress of the United States. I took my 63-year-old body yesterday and walked the halls of Congress for 12 hours. And if you've ever taken a look at how the House of Representatives of America is laid out, we have office buildings. I think Longfellow, then we have Rayburn, and then we have Cannon. And they're just spread out, and all the offices are there. So when you go to meet, you'll get a meeting in Rayburn that's over here. And then that meeting ends. 15 minutes later, you have a meeting in Longfellow over here. So you got to walk all the way down there, have your meeting. And then that meeting takes place. And then 15 minutes later, you have a meeting over here in Cannon. And you end up crossing back and forth all day long. It's the most exhausting thing I've ever done in my adult life since being in the Marine Corps. But I did that yesterday, meeting with members of Congress and their staff. You know, yesterday morning when I woke up, there were huge rings under my eyes. Want to know why? Because I haven't slept well in 6 months. Because every day, and I'm being serious, every night when I go to bed, I can't sleep because my brain is working. And it's running the numbers and it's saying, how do we stop a nuclear war? And I can't stop it. I can't stop every time
I perfectly understand you, because ever since the war in Ukraine started, I got the same feeling. And I was thinking, okay, so the war starts. Where do I run? What do I do with my husband? Now I have to hide it because they're going to come and take him. Where do I hide it? What do I do with the cats? What do I do with the parents? And it was going on and on and on and on, because for me, when you're 55 kilograms, for me, war it doesn't matter if it is conventional or nuclear or whatever, it's a complete disaster. It's a disaster. There's no way of winning, you know. I'll end up right dead, whatever. I mean, there's no way something good can come out of it. And this is why I started this program and I was thinking about peace. And I was thinking all sorts of naive solutions in these very long nights where I kept thinking about war and what do I do if it starts. In all this history, you know, we developed such advanced weapons. Why can't we think of some non-lethal weapons, you know? Because you said about these dogs. But you know, there is the possibility of actually using an anesthetic. Why can't we use that on people? And maybe a gas that would put everybody to sleep and then go take the weapons.
It's
Maybe
funny.
we're very naive, you know, but when you spend nights and nights thinking
Well,
about things that seem
it's not naive. Um, I'm a Marine, and I'm trained to do certain things um, that result in the death of human beings. But we, at the end of the Gulf War back in 1991, emerged from that war and said, you know, we're going to be called upon to respond to crises around the world. Um, what do we? Why is the only tool we have to kill people? And we're Marines, and we kill people better than anybody. That's what we do. And we're sitting there going, well, this isn't a good situation because we may actually get in a situation where we don't have to kill if we had other options. And so the Marine Corps, these elite killers, came up with solutions. We said, what if we developed a sticky foam? So let's say we're guarding a position and a crowd comes running towards us of rioters. Rather than machine gun them down, we hit them with sticky foam. And as they run in, they get stuck. We also, if somebody breaks free, rather than shooting them with a rifle, we developed a non-lethal beanbag that we fire and it knocks you down. We developed sonic weapons that we could turn on, and the noise would cause people to cover their ears and move. It's painful, but they don't die. And we built all these weapons, and we used them. We took them to Somalia, and we actually used them in Somalia. Um, and they had some success. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, the people that are having those rioters come towards you, they have an objective that they want to accomplish. And sticky foam isn't going to stop them from accomplishing it. So they will find another way. They will come at you from a different angle. They will commit an act of violence. They will start terrorizing people until ultimately we Marines have to put down our toys and pick up our weapons and kill. Um, that's just the sad reality. We actually looked at it. And hopefully people continue to look at it because I do believe that we should be seeking non-lethal ways. To me, though, to be honest, the second I get into a boxing ring, I'm going to beat you up, or you're going to beat me up because we're in a boxing ring. You know how we prevent each other from beating each other up?
not
Stop
getting.
having boxing. Stop having boxing rings. So I while I continue to support the pursuit of non-lethal
Mhm.
force, I prefer diplomacy. Imagine if we took right now we in America we have this budget for nuclear weapons. It's a huge budget. Imagine if I were able to get disarmament back and we could take this money and use it to build bridges, improve healthcare, but also take a good chunk of it and make the State Department a powerful tool of diplomacy, where we hired quality people and we went around the world and these people talk. This is your weapon now. Verbs, the language, and we talk. Talking's frustrating. I know because I watch you and sometimes I say things and you're not a good poker player. And I say things and I can see on your face, you're like, oh God, I hate when he says that. Oh, geez. That's okay. You want to know why? Because we're talking. Nobody's getting hurt. Maybe feelings get hurt, but that's okay. Tomorrow, We wake up, we eat breakfast, and we start talking again. Nobody died. And as long as we're talking, nobody's dying. We're keeping them out of the boxing ring. That to me is the best strategy. See, if you're talking about non-lethal weapons, you're still in the boxing ring.
Mhm.
Still in the boxing ring. We got to keep people out of the boxing ring. We got to keep talking and talking and talking. And I don't care if their jaws hurt. I don't care if they have bags under their eyes. I don't care, if their complexion is bad because they've been indoors. I don't care because they're still alive. As long as we keep old people talking, then the young people don't have to kill each other. And that's what I'm trying to, this is what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm trying to buy time so that we don't have a nuclear war, so that we can begin a process of negotiations that ends this nightmare that's on your borders, this conflict in Ukraine, which has been so devastating for so many people, especially the Ukrainian people. So many dead soldiers, so many crippled soldiers, so many refugees. Romania plays host to Ukrainian refugees, and you're going to have more now. They just blew up all the energy infrastructure. This winter's getting cold, and more people are going to come over because they have no choice. They're going to die if they stay there. So they're going to come over, these refugees. This war has to come to an end. And it's only going to come to an end if old people are locked up in a room talking to each other. We have to get the
Definitely.
people in the boxing.
But you know what my biggest fear is right now? I just spoke with Rainer Brown, who he's the president of International Peace Bureau. And the idea is that my biggest fear now is that we get rid of one set of lunatics. I'm sorry, President Biden, I think qualifies, especially lately with the decisions he made. And now we get another set that is not advocating for war in Ukraine, but with war, I don't know, in Syria or with China, or supporting Israel to actually destroy what's left of Gaza. And I think that is very difficult to get people talking, because it seems that in the United States, I don't know if I'm correct in this assessment, you just change the Russia hoax with the China hoax or the Israel hoax or whatever.
You're not wrong. I mean, you're tragically, you're right. Um, there is a difference though.
Mhm.
With the Russia hawks, it always came down to a military solution because it's a inherited behavior from the Cold War. With China, we haven't yet allowed the military to hijack the um, the mechanisms of interface with China. We still view China primarily through an economic competition lens. So even though the China hawks are coming in, we're not going to start with a war. We're going to start with economic competition that could turn into an economic war, but we have a long way to go to get to a shooting war with China. Whereas Russia, because we had the situation from the Cold War, we went straight to the military confrontation. And then I will also say this, that there's a dynamic taking place here in America that maybe the world isn't picking up on. But the Americans people are becoming tired of war, tired of endless war. And it manifests itself in any number of ways. When I uh, when I joined the military as a child, I mean, literally, I enlisted when I was 17 years old.
Mm.
Um, my head was full of all the nonsense and the propaganda and, save America, defend democracy, da, 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 da. And I believed it. And I was right to believe. Back then, I actually believed that I was right to believe. I wasn't, I'm not going to attack myself for believing it because it was a genuine belief that this could happen. Maybe a belief born of ignorance. I know that my parents rolled their eyes because my dad and my mom were in the military during the Vietnam War, and they lost all romantic notions of war because of Vietnam. And here I come, a Ronald Reagan guy, and we're going to save America from communism, and they're going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and they're just rolling their eyes. But I went forward and I did that. In America, the American society acted the same way. We're exhausted as a society right now. We are literally exhausted. We wake up in the morning, we have an economy that's not doing well. It does well for the very rich, but it
Mhm.
doesn't do well for the average working person. Um, we have healthcare that is disastrous. I don't want to get too. I have a very close relative who is just diagnosed with cancer, and fortunately is going to get the had the surgery and is getting the therapy, the chemotherapy, but the health insurance plan doesn't cover many of the drugs, the life-saving drugs. And so suddenly, this very close relative um, is and they don't have the money to buy the life-saving drugs. So fortunately, the family has come together, and we are diverting resources to make this happen. But this isn't good. This is not how society is supposed to work. Society is supposed to take care of people. You're not supposed to go bankrupt to save the life of somebody who can be cured through medical intervention, which is mainstream. It's not like this is an innovative therapy. All of America has this. The average American today wakes up knowing that if they miss a paycheck, they lose their home, they lose their cars, they lose everything. They don't have savings anymore. We don't have savings accounts. We don't have security. We're living day to day on the edge of economic disaster. And then we look and we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars off to do things that make no sense. Not only that, but do things that will kill us because of this nuclear war potential. America is exhausted, and this is starting to have an impact. You can call Trump the next version of insane American leadership, and you're not wrong, except that unlike the past iterations, this time he was elected on a mandate of peace. The American people who voted for him said no to the Ukraine war and said no to war in Russia and said no to war in general. Trump, disingenuous, but he says that his first term, I kept America out of wars. I kept you out of a war in the Middle East and all that. Not really, but that's okay. It's his story. He gets to tell it any way he wants to. But the American people went, good. We want you to keep us out of wars coming forward. So I do believe that there is pressure on Trump that doesn't exist on Biden to keep us out of wars, which means there's more opportunity for old people to go yak, yak, yak.
Mhm.
So I'm relatively optimistic. I'm not naive. I'm not pretending that everything's going to be wonderful. But to give you an example, what we're doing here tomorrow, it's not about changing Biden's mind. Biden doesn't even have a mind to change. I apologize for going that direction, but this is a statement of fact. It's not about changing his administration. They're only here for a few more weeks. Um, it's about awakening a consciousness in Congress about the danger of nuclear war and to identify that. When I keep bringing back the Marine Corps because, and I know you don't like it because it's the military and it's like
No,
glorification.
I actually had to teach a course at some point in some security studies because one of the teachers got very ill and I had to replace him, very short notice. I was first terrified because there were people from the special forces, there were people, from the army, and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to discuss with these people because I'm a Marxist feminist. I mean, you couldn't find something further away, from their mentality. But they earned my respect. At least some of them earned my respect because they were very serious people and really devoted and really to give their life to save me and the other citizens of Romania. Not all of them, especially those in the secret services, really left a bad impression. But I don't want to generalize because also there are professionals. And yeah, like it or not, I still believe that there has to be a transition, from this period if you want to achieve peace, going through no little ways, and you still need these guys.
Well, the Marine Corps made me who I am as a professional. My work ethic, my values, the belief in doing the right thing. But I remember when I was a lieutenant, I was in a battalion, and my commander uh, encouraged me, for all of us, to, if we saw a problem, to say, "Hey, there's a problem. because you don't want problems to exist. But he told us he's a cigar smoking Marine colonel back when you could smoke cigars. And he pulled the cigar out of his mouth. He goes, Ritter, if you're going to stand up and tell me there's a problem, you better damn well have a solution. Son, I don't want you standing up and pointing fingers and saying there's a problem and then sitting down and not telling me how to fix the problem. If you're going to say there's a problem, have a solution to the problem. And that's a very important lesson, that it's not about complaining, it's about solving problems. And then the other thing that comes out of it is, if you don't identify the problem correctly, whatever solution you think you're putting forward isn't going to solve the problem, because it's solving nothing. If the problem is an apple, but you've identified it as a rose, and so your solution deals with roses, you're not solving the problem, because it's an apple. So you have to identify the problem, properly too. It's all about education. It's all about perspective. It's all this. And we're in a situation today where, thankfully, there is universal acknowledgement of what the problem is. The problem is this danger of nuclear war. I emerged from these meetings, they all agree. I didn't get any pushback. Look, I did this back to try and stop the Iraq war on weapons of mass destruction.
Mm-hmm.
I was a chief weapons inspector for 7 years. I knew more about Iraqi weapons of mass destruction and what it took to disarm them and what we had achieved than virtually anybody on the planet. I would go to Congress and they would push back. Nah, they got to have chemical weapons. I said, they don't. Let me tell you how. No, 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 no. The CIA says this, that, and the other thing. Pushback, pushback, pushback. I got no pushback. When I said we are on the cusp of a nuclear war, they all went, yeah, no, this is crazy. This is insane. This is dangerous. So we identified the problem. That's a big step. That's a big step in the right direction. And there is universal acknowledgement of what the solution is. Stop firing ATACMS missiles into Russia. If you stop doing that, you break the cycle of escalation, and then we can focus on yak, 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 yak to stop the war in Ukraine.
But I think until Biden is out, it's very difficult to get there, isn't it?
You're not going to stop the ATACMS missiles from being launched under Biden. But here's the thing, too. Perception creates its own reality. Again, you're actually probably better positioned to talk about these things than I am, but human interaction. Okay, you and I have talked for a while, but I bet when you first talked to me, you had a perception of who I was. And especially when I opened up and talked about necessary evil of war, that just solidified certain perceptions of you had of me. And therefore, if somebody came to you and said, how would you predict Scott Ritter is going to behave? You would say, well, based upon my perception, Scott Ritter is going to do the following.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would take actions in anticipation of that. All right. So now the Russians are looking at the United States, and you have this idiot Buchanan. I'm sorry, he's an admiral. I can't call him an idiot. He's only obeying orders. You have this man who you rightfully said is a very intelligent man, a very knowledgeable man, coming up with a war plan to win against Russia. And the Russians are looking at that, and it shapes their perceptions. And and then they look at the ATACMS missiles, and they say, from a perception standpoint, we think they're getting ready to launch an attack to cover a preemptive attack, etc. If I can get Congress to articulate loudly that they don't support this, that this is a Biden-only initiative that nobody supports. Biden didn't clear it with Congress. One thing I found when talking to the most senior members of Congress and their staffs is that Joe Biden didn't come to him and said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm letting you know that we're going to war against Russia. Biden just did it, and Congress woke up the next day and went, how did this happen? You're supposed to come to us. There's a dysfunction in the Biden administration. But if you can get Congress to say, this is a problem, we don't want a nuclear war, we know the solution, and we're trying to create that solution. Now, go back to the Russians and their perception. Does it change a little bit? Now the Russians are looking at America, and it's not just about America is collectively trying to position themselves to launch a nuclear attack of preemption against Russia. Now they're looking at America going, there's critical parts of America that are opposed to this, that are trying to make changes. The perception changes. And then if you can get Trump, because Trump has a perception too, he has to be prepared to take over on January 20th and then negotiate with the Russians. And he wants to negotiate from a position of strength. So he doesn't want to be seen as giving away a negotiating position um, in advance. And so he may say the ATACMS thing is a tool I can hold in my pocket until January 20th. But if Congress starts articulating that this is a clear and present threat and that stopping the ATACMS is the solution, even though Biden won't do it, Trump may say, oh, this tool is more valuable taking it out of my pocket and playing it now and articulating, no, when I become president, we won't launch ATACMS missiles against you. Now the Russian perception is rather than being prepared to go to war right now to preempt Biden insanity, we will go into a defensive huddle, we'll absorb these ATACMS attacks, and we will give Trump a chance to do the right thing. The perception changes. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm having this meeting tomorrow. I just was informed by the Russian embassy. I invited them. They're sending two high-level people to attend, so they're going to be listening to this. Because communication isn't just about what happens in a circle. You actually have to have this communicated to other people to change perceptions. We're going to start off with a panel that's going to talk about the danger of nuclear war. And we have some very high-quality experts on there. We're then going to have two follow-on panels. One is going to be what pressure can be put on Congress and the Biden administration to reverse this policy course. But the second one is how do we get MAGA, Trump, to articulate a position on ATACMS missiles before January 20th. And we'll be discussing that. And I invited the Russians because I want them, and I'm going to tell them straight to their face. You know, are you familiar? Do you watch American movies? Are you familiar with American culture at all?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so do you know Jerry Maguire?
Yes, of course, of
Yeah,
course.
you remember the famous scene, Cuban Gooding Jr.? You know, help, no, Tom Cruise,
Let me help
help
you.
me, help you.
Mhm.
Well, tomorrow I'm going to turn to the Russians and I'm going to say, help me, help you. Help me, help you. Okay? The way you help me is to listen what's happening here today and report it back to your leadership so that your leadership changes its perception of America, so that you understand that this entire system is not trying to launch a preemptive attack against you, that this system is trying to stop that. Give this system a chance. Help me help you. I'm trying to stop this impetus to a nuclear war, but it is meaningless if you continue to act as if we're trying to attack you. Help me help you. And I'm optimistic. I had a good night's sleep last night. I don't ever have a good night's sleep. I have a good night's sleep last night because I came out of Congress. For the first time, I ran the numbers in my head about the danger of a nuclear war. And you know what? I saw a solution. I saw a path
It's a
forward.
very good. You
And I
know,
went,
in Romania, they are trying to sell us this idea that I think even me as a naive person in this matters thing is crazy, that we can use a small bomb, a nuclear bomb. How do you do that, man? I mean, I think it's impossible. I mean, and it will kill like what? 60% of Romania instead of 100%. I mean, what does what does it even mean, a small or a tactical? Because they try
yeah,
to rebrand it. No, you're something that is not so dangerous and we shouldn't be afraid of.
no, this is ignorance personified. You know, the interesting thing about humans is when you're you're still young. I can say that because I'm older than you are. And so, but when, you know, we already had this discussion back in the late 70s and the early 1980s. We talked about neutron bombs. You see, we're getting ready to fight a war. And I'm saying this for your Romanian audience, guys. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. We were prepared to fight a war against the Soviets on German soil. Germany was split at that time into East Germany and West Germany. The Soviet group of forces was in East Germany, almost 1 million strong. We had our forces, NATO forces, American forces in West Germany. And we believed that the Soviets were going to attack, to drive to the Rhine River and defeat NATO. And we were preparing to stop that. What we wanted to do initially, from our perspective, is that we couldn't afford to keep 1 million men in West Germany. So we kept 300,000, and we had about 300,000 to 500,000 in the United States. If we thought there was going to be a war, then we would fly these soldiers in. We had on the ground in Germany pre-positioned equipment, tanks, everything already maintained. The soldiers would get off the airplane, get into the tanks, turn it on, and go fight the war. But and then when we did that, we could stop the Soviet advance. But it would take about 10 days to do this.
Mm.
And so during this time, the forces that were there would have to hold off the Soviets. But they had 1 million guys, we had 300,000. So at first we said we're going to trade space for time. So as the Soviets advance, we're going to retreat and they're going to capture Western. And the West Germans went, no, we're not going to give up our territory. That's not going to happen. We're going to fight the Russians at the front. Not 1 inch of German territory freely goes to the Russians. And we went, oh, well, that complicates things. Okay, we're going to use nuclear weapons then. So as the Russians come, we're going to use nuclear weapons early on to disrupt it. And the Germans went, no, because if you use a nuclear weapon on our soil, Romania, listen to me, please. If you use nuclear weapons on our soil, that area will not be able to be lived in and used for 1,000 years. Okay? Are you hearing me, Romania? 1,000 years. So we came up with an idea of the neutron bomb. You see, it's a new kind of bomb. It's small, it's cute, it's a baby. You could dress it up, put pink ears on it, hug it, sing it lullabies, and put it into an artillery shell and fire it. And it would go up against a village, and it would, instead of the explosive power, it would have a whole bunch of gamma rays, intense radiation. Yes, in the middle would be a little explosion and the village would be blown up. But instead of heat and fire, the gamma rays get. Now, if you're a soldier in the tank, the gamma rays penetrate the tank and you get it and you die. So in a couple days, all the Russian soldiers that were hit die. Their tanks are down. But the radiation has a very small half-life. And in several months, maybe a few years, you can come back to this territory and begin to live in it again. And it made nuclear war sort of cool, attractive, sexy, because you weren't destroying the land. But what we realized is the moment you use this tactical nuclear weapon, you've escalated. The other side will now use their nuclear weapon, and you can't control that outcome. You have no guarantee that they're going to hit you with a sexy little neutron. They may hit you with the real deal. Boom, big. And now you got to respond with the big. And we begin a cycle of escalation that leads to 1,000 Russian missiles coming in, 1,000 of American missiles going out, and everybody dying. There is no such thing as a limited nuclear war. It is a fantasy. We already did this, guys, once before. Why do you have people today reinventing a wheel that we prove doesn't work? There is no such thing as a limited nuclear war. A tactical nuclear weapon, once used, will automatically lead to an escalation that within a matter of minutes has a general nuclear exchange. This is a reality. We've done this before. People smarter than anybody in Romania today have already thought about this. And the reason why I'm insulting Romania is you are so stupid to believe in the potential of a tactical nuclear weapon. I don't mean to insult you, but if you're thinking this is something you can do.
No, unfortunately, I had a very violent encounter with another, analyst, military analyst, and he didn't understand the thing. I'm trying to advance the agenda of peace. I'm trying to do it because it is the least I can do. Unfortunately, Romanian politicians act, and my feeling is like a drunken uncle shows up at your wedding and starts telling all sorts of crazy things. And I'm like, oh, please shut up. Things like we are going to take Russia on our own. Really, us Romanians. have you really thought about it? And enough with the crazy talk. I mean, it's very difficult, for me to associate myself with these people who are keyboard warriors, and they are in key positions, unfortunately. They are in key positions.
Don't they know
They are
don't they
not
know their own
willing to give
history?
up the power, and they go on television and they tell people about all these things. And unfortunately, I do realize how crazy it is. And I think a lot of Romanians do. But unfortunately, the sad part is that Russia tries to associate us with these people because they are in power. They don't care about me, a woman in a village in Romania, because this is why, and they care about the president, the prime minister, Ministry of Interior, defense, generals. And unfortunately, they are talking crazy, and it's so worrying. And this is why I invited you. It's not the whole of Romania, it's these people who, for whatever reason, are pushing this pro-war agenda. I think some of them are cynical, and I think they have bank accounts probably in Florida and nice mansions. And the minute the war starts, I am left here to have fun with the Russians, and they are long gone. And I will be here, and the other fellow Romanian citizens, we are going to be left here to face the music, because this is what it's happening, oftentimes.
I would just tell Romanians you have to read your own history. Didn't you try this once before? Didn't in 1941 you guys moved into that across the border and Bessarabia, then you went into Ukraine, and you guys, well, you even got to a place called Stalingrad. Do you remember that? It was such a wonderful experience for you Romanians because you were out there with the Germans, linking arms, eating kielbasa, and singing songs until the Russians counterattacked and destroyed your armies, pushed you back, killed all your men, came in, took over your country. Is this what you want? Because this is what's going to happen, Romania. You can't beat the Russians. And NATO is just another Nazi Germany in disguise.
But you know
NATO
what they are talking now? They are saying that we have to hold the Russians for 1 month. I mean, we Romanians, we are going, because then NATO will come and defend us. And I'm sorry, I don't see Americans, sticking their skin and trying to save us. I'm very skeptical that we are so important. And I think we should have played our cards better and make, more profound and thoughtful analysis before launching ourselves into this type of declarations. And for now, you said at some point that your only hope is that the Russians are rational enough. And I'm very sorry to say, but when I see what crazy talk comes of the mouth of some Romanian politicians, this is the only hope now.
Well, actually, no, there's a different hope. Ready? Remember how I told you about American democracy and how, I mean, it's ugly. I mean, I was in Congress and it ain't pretty. Watching Congress work is an exercise in frustration. It's ineffective, inefficient. It's ineffective in many ways, but it does work if you allow it to work. It requires the people to vote the right people into position. Now, Romania did something fascinating. You held a presidential election,
But now
and
we annulled the first round of
correct,
presidential election.
but that all that proves because that candidate hasn't been removed. He still gets to run.
Yet. He hasn't been removed yet.
But are the Romanian people so docile as to sit there and say, "Oh no, a court has determined that we're idiots and they're going to annul this." And so you're going to allow this, or are the Romanian people going to show that they are indeed people, individuals, and say, fine, bring the election on again, and we're going to vote for the same people, and he's going to win. You guys want to stop the insanity? Vote the right people into office. And you have a candidate who is about stopping this war, promoting peace. This isn't, you talk about being helpless. You say, I'm helpless because these idiot politicians. You have a politician who's saying the right things, a man who could make a difference, a man who could bring about peace. You have a chance to vote him into office. Don't let a court stop you. do your duty as citizens, or otherwise.
I think he will be arrested, and I think he will be some or expelled given the chance to flee the country. I'm very pessimistic and skeptical. We will definitely have you on again to
Then take
discuss
to
the
the streets.
situation because I don't think that is gonna work out. I mean, I see such mobilization, against him. And I mean, he's not because he wanted to invite Netanyahu and he wanted to support the other war in Gaza. He's not a pro-peace activist like myself. So we have to be very careful with these people. I mean, what do? You support mass murder in Gaza and then you oppose the war in Ukraine is not very clear. And I'm skeptical they are going to. And Romanians, unfortunately, don't have this militant tradition that you have in the United States. We are more, because we haven't had also hope. We haven't seen people really working for us. It went from bad to worse for 30 years. We are kind of depressed and kind of beaten. But let's hope that if they give us the chance to vote again, because I'm pretty sure he would have won with all
Yeah.
this crazy talk, because like Donald Trump said that crazy thing about migrants killing, pets and eating them. This guy of ours has his, fair share of crazy declaration. But despite all of that, I think he would have won. But let's see if they don't arrest him, they don't expel him, they don't do something, they don't postpone the elections till next year, We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. But all I'm saying is that, look, no politician's perfect and compromises have to be made. If I were Romanian, of course, I'd be upset, especially a Romanian who supports peace. Very upset with Gaza. Very upset with Gaza and what's going on. But Gaza's over there. The thing that's going to cause you to lose sleep about your mother, your cat, your this, your that, is Ukraine and Russia. So if you have a politician that's going to solve the immediate problem, you need to put out that fire first before you can talk about putting out that fire. That fire is not going to burn you in Gaza. Morally, it burns you. It's a moral insult, an intellectual insult. But the thing that's going to consume you is this fire next door. And you have a firefighter, this presidential candidate, who says he can put that fire out. I'd support him. I'd give him a shot.
Yes, the sovereign parties, and he's not alone. Luckily, there are some parties that are also supporting peace. And, this proves military experts wrong that they say that we have war in our bloods. I mean, the first chance Romania got for somebody who's advocated for peace, no matter how crazy the guy is, because let me tell you, he tells some things that are, that make even Trump look a very reasonable person. and
Oh, well.
but the first chance they get, they voted for the guy. So yeah, let's hope for the best. I'm so happy that you came because I think you spread this optimism and finally you got a plan, to get Congress to have this declaration, and fingers crossed that you managed to do it. And let's hope we have the chance to discuss again next year, probably after
Absolutely. Yeah.
the elections and the inauguration of Donald Trump. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Peace, barricade.